program was recorded at RILA's annual logistics conference in Orlando, Florida. I'm pleased to welcome Editor-in-Chief of Supply Chain Brain, Russell Goodman.
Joining us for a conversation today on emerging logistics technology is Don Salvucci, Senior Director, Product Management, and Hal Feuchtwanger, Solutions Marketing Director at JDA Software. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you, Russell.
Hal, let's start with you. What do you see as some of the key industry factors that have been driving companies' decisions about logistics, and particularly over the last 5 or 10 years?
Well, certainly globalization has been a trend probably for the last 25 years that has driven businesses. But I think the most interesting element of how companies think about logistics today and organize behind it is the number of options they have in terms of business models. So if you think about the shipper kind of being in the center of the circle and the relationships they have with their logistics service providers, with system integrators or consultants, and lastly with technology providers, they have a whole range of options. And I think what we see, and hopefully Don will agree, is that there's this kind of convergence. And so where you typically may have gone to your consultant to do a project or do some design work, now you have the capability with technology to bring that in-house, or at least contemplate that decision. So I think the most interesting thing is how you strategically think about how you staff, organize, and support your operations with technology. There's a whole range of options in terms of those business models. The other element that globalization has added, for retailers, there's a lot of importation and ocean shipping, but for large CPG manufacturers who are global, they're moving more toward a localized model in terms of production and having it closer to their final demand. So the transportation logistics associated with that is not, across the ocean, but across countries, perhaps within a single continent, and that changes how they think about their business model. So they may have historically been a company that did everything in-house, but if they're operating in multiple geographies, they may in North America have a totally in-sourced model, but perhaps in EMEA or Asia, they may have a totally outsourced model. But the range of options available to them now are bigger, than they've ever been.
Well, Don, as a technology provider, how have you adapted to the kind of changes in the marketplace that Hal was just talking about?
Well, Russell, I think first and foremost, it's really as a technology provider, it's opened up markets to us that we may not have been able to address before. So the companies or even business units within an organization that would not have considered technology before is now needing to consider that. And because of that, we've had to really offer a lot more flexible deployment options. So where traditionally we had offered only a licensed on-premise deployment, we're now able to offer more flexible options that work best for the needs of the customer, such as a software as a service or more of a hosted type offering. And even for a company who doesn't have the capital expenditure up front to immediately deploy on site, they can start with a software as a service hosted type offering, even if they ultimately want to move that into their own premise deployment later on.
Hal, a question for you. What kind of significant changes in technology have you seen that has caused you to alter or adapt the way you design and deliver your solutions?
Well, I think Don talked about the flexibility in terms of the deployment options, but there's some other core technology changes. I think maybe Don will talk a little bit about platform, but I talked about convergence in the first question in terms of the business models. I see a similar convergence coming in terms of technology. And you can talk about the proliferation in the last 5 to 10 years of personal computing and personal applications. And I think there's ultimately will be a convergence where you see this kind of Facebook phenomenon. At some point in time, those type of capabilities they'll find some practical business applications for them as well. So it's going to be an interesting time. There's obviously been some core technology changes that we've made more recently, but I think there's some interesting changes still down the road, and some of those have yet to be determined or yet to be defined. So.
Don, any other thoughts on that?
I do. Well, certainly, as Hal mentioned, the internet phenomenon. The personal computer is everywhere on phones. Certainly, everyone has them. So the availability of technology to everyone on the street has certainly changed the way that we approach the problem. Being able to access applications from your smartphone, from your home, so leveraging that. But from a platform perspective, there's also the evolution of web services and business process platforms, and being able to more tightly tie applications such as a TMS to other applications and really creating a customized workflow that works for your organization and cross-organization as we kind of look back to what Hal said about the options of trading partners that you're working with.
Hal, do you have one or two instances that you can tell us about where your customers have utilized your technology to drive innovation in their own organization?
Absolutely. I'll give you one example, and I think it's very interesting. Dawn talked about the whole platform, and the beauty of this whole platform technology is you get the benefit of best-of-breed solution application providers like JDA, but also you don't lose legacy systems or other commercial available systems. And we had one company, a big automaker, who was interested in developing what they call the total landed cost sourcing solution. And so what they did is they took component engines. So they took a transportation planning engine that contained all the tariffs, the carrier tariffs, to get all the discrete transportation costs. They took an inventory optimization solution to understand the trade-offs. You know, if you're going to source locally versus nearshore versus offshore, there are going to be inventory implications and carrying costs. So those were two commercially available solutions. But they also leveraged then their own parts supply catalog that had all the different pricing for all their different vendors and supplier parts. And then the fourth component was the actual import costs of taxes and duties and things like that. So what they essentially did was use the platform to leverage these four solutions really as kind of engine and create this composite solution for total landed cost. But they created an entirely new and separate workflow, an entirely new and separate user interface structure, but all the component parts underneath created what ended up being a single solution that they call total landed cost.
Dawn, I don't think that we can have a conversation today about logistics and supply chain without eventually talking about sustainability. So tell us, what technologies in your view are out there that are coming that can help companies be greener?
Well, my perspective on that, Russell, is when we look at it specifically in transportation, the things that make an organization green are really just good cost-saving transportation practices that have been around for a long time. So for a company like JDA that has a very rich heritage in optimization, in helping companies to reduce their miles and cube out their trucks, or cube utilization, mileage reduction, and better optimizing the routes, reducing the number of trucks they need to put on the road, that's really the biggest technology benefit that we can provide to our customers. And it's refreshing to me to see this come back around full circle. It was something that was very important to companies in the 90s, and we kind of lost sight of that over maybe the early part of this decade, but it's really, optimization has become very important again to a lot of organizations.
Last question. Let's start, though, with Dawn this time. As you look down the road over the next decade or so, what kind of advice are you going to give to customers or potential customers as they are developing their strategies as it relates to logistics and supply chain?
Well, the biggest piece of advice that I have for companies is to begin to have more strategically collaborative relationships with their trading partners and their service providers. Here at the RILA conference, I had the opportunity to attend a session on international logistics yesterday, and it was a very heated, emotional discussion in the area of the availability of ocean capacity and the volatility of ocean rates. And at the end of the session, one person made a comment of, how many of you are working with your service providers to better forecast what you're going to need in advance, right? We have this business with very long lead times, and as we become more global, that's only going to increase. So really my one piece of advice is truly become more strategically collaborative with your trading partners, truly form partnerships with the companies that are providing you services, and don't make just a purely cost-based decision as you're choosing those partners.
Good advice. Hal, let's close with your thoughts.
I think this all connects in the end, the collaboration with your partners. And when I talked about this Facebook phenomenon earlier, I think where it ultimately is leading us is in this direction of these consortium-based models. And there were attempts at it in the past, I think in the 90s, building exchanges and whatnot, but for a lot of reasons they didn't fail. I don't know that it was necessarily a failure of technology, but I think there will be new technology that will create the capability to connect partners more elegantly, more closely, and they'll be able to trade within this framework of what we call a consortium shippers business model. So that may be further down the road, but a lot of companies, including JDA, are kind of beginning to move in that direction, and it's actually where the market is really, I think, ultimately going to take us.
Well, valuable information, and I want to thank each of you for being with us here today.
You're welcome.
Don Salvucci, Hal Feuchtwanger, JDA Software, speaking with us today about emerging logistics technology. Thanks for watching.